On October 25, 1994, Susan Smith frantically contacted police in Union, South Carolina. She said she was carjacked by a man while at a stoplight. The man took her car with her two little boys strapped into their car seats in the back seat. Hi, I'm Denise with Fascinating Cases. So I want to talk about the Susan Smith case. I was hesitating because I was so disturbed by what happened to the children, but I think there are important lessons to be learned from this case.
I want to say to my babies that your mama loves you so much. I just feel in my heart that you're okay. We will do anything we will to help you to get them home. Please bring them home.
This is the third video, really, in a series of videos that I recently posted about cases that racially divided a city. First, there was Charles Stewart, who killed his wife in Boston, and John Anderson, who killed his wife in Milwaukee. And now we'll talk about Susan Smith. Susan Smith was born in 1971 in Union, South Carolina. She had a sad upbringing. Her parents tried to give her and her two siblings a middle-class lifestyle, but they were plagued with domestic issues and financial trouble. Shortly after they divorced in 1977, her father died by taking his own life when Susan was only 6, and she was deeply affected by this, and it likely contributed to her lifelong struggle with depression. Her mother, Linda, remarried quickly to a local businessman named Bev Russell. He started abusing Susan in her teens, and it lasted for years. Susan was a smart girl and was considered popular and friendly at school. But she was dealing with a lot of emotional stress. She tried to overdose on aspirin and Tylenol at 13 years old. She reported the abuse to the authorities, but ultimately it went nowhere. Her mother stayed with Bev, and the abuse continued. Her mother betrayed her. How could a mother do that? Stay with the man that is abusing her daughter. Susan would go on to have numerous inappropriate relationships with older men, including one with a high school counselor. Her second attempt at her own life came after high school graduation, after a married man she was involved with broke off the affair. Susan met David Smith, and then when they both worked at a grocery store in Union, they dated in the late 80s and married in March of 1991, and they had two sons, Michael and Alex. But the marriage was troubled. Both David and Susan cheated, and they struggled to make ends meet. The two separated, and while still married to David, Susan began seeing 27-year-old Tom Finlay. He was the son of a wealthy local businessman who was the CEO of a textile company where Susan worked. The relationship was short and intense. Susan really wanted to be with Tom, but Tom was having doubts about Susan. He wasn't ready to take on the responsibility of raising Susan's two sons, Michael and Alex, now 3 and 1 years old. And technically, Susan was still married to David. On the 18th of October, 1994, Tom sent Susan a letter citing his concerns, and he ended the relationship. Susan was devastated. That was only a few days before the carjacking that Susan reported October 25th. Tom said there were other reasons he broke it off with Susan. David Smith was acting out in jealousy, and Tom thought Susan was unstable. So at this point, Susan is in a bad way. The man she really wanted to be with didn't want her or her kids. Back to October 25th, 1994. Susan appeared on a woman's porch about a quarter mile from John D. Long Lake in Union. She was crying hysterically, saying, "Help me. A black man has my car and he's got my kids." 911 is called, and the Union County Sheriff's Department responds. According to Susan, she was stopped at a red light near John D. Long Lake when a black man with a gun got into her car and said, "Shut up and drive." About 3 to 4 miles down the road, he told Susan to get out. She asked if she could take her kids, and he said he didn't have time, and he sped off. A search around the area, around the lake, turned up nothing. Susan described her attacker, and the police sketch artist released a drawing about what the man looked like. Susan said the man appeared to be about 40 years old. Susan and David made a plea to the media to get their kids back.
Pray every day that you're taking care of them, and know that we will do anything we will to help you to get them home back to us. I just can't express it enough.
David and Susan both took a lie detector test. David's results indicated he knew nothing about his kid's disappearance. Susan's were inconclusive, but the highest level of deception was recorded when she was asked, "Do you know where your children are?" the case started to gain traction. Media from all over the nation were reporting on the hijacking of two little boys. Susan was interviewed 3 times at the sheriff's office, and her story was changing a bit. She said she took the kids to Walmart, but when nobody at the store remembered seeing Susan and her kids, Susan said actually she drove around with the kids for a couple hours. She said she stopped at the Monarch Mills intersection at a red light, but saw no other cars. And this was a big red flag for investigators. The light at the intersection stayed green unless another car from a side street triggered it, so Susan, seeing no cars, would not have had to stop. David told investigators that Susan was seeing other men, and when asked who, the name Tom Finley came up. They learned about his letter, Dear John, to Susan, breaking off the relationship, in part because of the kids. When confronted with this, Susan said, "No man would make me hurt my children. They were my life." And they noticed the use of the past tense in that sentence. Investigators came right out and asked Susan if she killed her kids. Susan became enraged and walked out of the interview. David was getting frustrated too. He couldn't understand why the authorities were focusing in on Susan. The FBI provided a profile of a homicidal mother, and it fit Susan to a T. By October 28th at a press conference, Union County Sheriff Howard Wells said there are no new updates to the case, and they are still looking at both David and Susan. Privately, they were really focusing in on Susan. They believed she was lying about the disappearance of her children. Investigators were trying to break Susan down. They confronted her with a copy of the letter that Tom sent her. It pointed to motive, that her kids were in the way. On November 3rd, 1994, David and Susan sat on a couch holding hands, giving TV interviews. Susan is again questioned whether she had anything to do with her kids' disappearance. She said no, and David said he believed her.
I do understand why they're having to do what they're doing. I'm all they have. Right now, they have not been able to rule anyone out. I don't think I'm any more of a suspect than anyone in this case right now.
Sheriff Howard Wells interviewed Susan again. He told her she was causing tension in Union's Black community and that he knew her story was a lie. Susan asked him if he would pray with her. He did, and then he said, "Susan, it's time." Susan confessed, saying she was so ashamed. Her children were not all right. She said she planned to do herself in on October 25th. She planned to drive her car into the lake with her kids in their car seats in the back. She was going to drive them into John D. Long Lake. And she said her children and her would be better off being with God, and they would die together. Susan said she put her car in neutral and let it roll down the ramp into the lake. But she got out of the car. Can you imagine the fear that encompassed 3-year-old Michael and 1-year-old Alex as the car slowly filled with dark, cold water? I have a hard time getting that vision out of my head. The media and David would be alerted to the shocking news. Divers would find the car in 18 feet of water, with the kids in their car seats in the back seat, with one little hand pressed against the window.
Susan Smith has been arrested and will be charged with 2 counts of murder in connection with the deaths of her children, Michael 3 and Alexander 14 months.
The community and the nation hated her and were calling her a baby killer. I hated her too, and I don't like having hate in my heart. I realized that she was a deeply disturbed woman. Many people were truly angry because here was another person who thought they would blame a black man, and it would make their chances of getting away with murder easier, just like Charles Stewart and Jesse Anderson. A day after Susan Smith's arrest and confession, blacks and whites in the community of Union came together at a town meeting. They were looking for comfort and healing in each other. Susan Smith's brother apologized to the black community. Susan would be given a psychiatric evaluation to see if she would be mentally fit for trial. She was considered sane and only depressed when she was alone. She needed attention and affection to function. On July 19, 1995, her trial began. Prosecutors portrayed her as a selfish, manipulative mother who killed her children for the love of a man. The defense said Susan battled a life of sadness. She was depressed and felt like a failure. He cited her father's death and the sexual abuse she endured. The defense said Susan planned to do herself in with the boys, but her body made her get out of the car. During the trial, it is found out that Susan's abuse by her stepfather Bev turned consensual eventually, lasting up almost until her devastating actions. They both attested to that. Bev would go on to say he had some guilt in this whole matter as well, obviously. Susan was found guilty on 2 counts of murder. During the penalty phase of the trial, the jurors were shown pictures of the bodies of Michael and Alex after they were pulled from the water. Susan was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison, and she was sent to prison at Columbia, South Carolina in July of 1998. Through the years, Susan would go on to have sex with 4 prison guards. She was busted for using drugs and mutilating herself. She received numerous medical treatments, I'm not sure what for. She was up for parole in November of 2024. She was denied.
I want to say how very sorry I am. I know that what I did was horrible. And I would give anything if I could go back and change it.
My thoughts. There's no question that Susan Smith was a deeply disturbed, depressed woman, but you don't kill your kids. You send them away if you're tempted to hurt them. And I do think she intended to hurt them. Did she even ask David if he wanted them? I think he would have said yes. What was going through her head when she put that car in neutral on the ramp? I'll never know. There are lessons to be learned here. Undiagnosed and untreated mental health conditions can lead to catastrophic decisions. Susan Smith lied about a black man being the perpetrator, and that led to a racially charged manhunt, and law enforcement was misled, wasting a lot of time. The case was a media sensation. The media has the power to shape the public's emotions and opinions, and this led to stereotypical judgments, in the early reporting especially. Although I do believe that law enforcement zeroed in on Susan Smith pretty quick. This case haunted me because of Susan Smith and her lies and her guilt. She got out of that car and watched it go into the water. People might call me crazy or call me naive, but here's what I want to believe. An angel came down and swooped those innocent boys up to heaven before they even had a slight chance to know what was happening. They were going to die anyway. Why didn't God just take them quickly? They were babies, and this is a vision I cling to. What do you think about this case? Do you think Susan Smith should get out of prison after her crimes? Let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you. Meanwhile, like and subscribe, and thanks for watching, and I'll be talking to you again real soon. Thanks.